I think it's safe to say you've all taken a bath at some point in your life. And if you don't have a bathtub in your apartment right now, you probably took tons of baths as a kid. A bath is usually a moment of relaxation that can last anywhere from a few minutes, or for those who like to take their time, to over an hour or two. Speaking of which, have you heard of Matthew Skinner? He's a British paleoanthropologist from the University of Kent. According to him, it could well be that due to climate change, humans in the future might actually develop webbed hands and feet. Yeah, it's simple. As the ice caps melt and sea levels rise, humans will likely have to deal with getting around in water more often. Well, that's Professor Skinner's prediction anyway. And he also believes humans will eventually develop sharper eyesight similar to that of cats. This will let people see more clearly underwater and, more importantly, let them see better in darker and deeper underwater environments. In short, the type of ideas that would make a lot of sci-fi screenwriters drool. But today, we don't have time to wait around for evolution to do its thing, because we're talking about spending 10 days in water non-stop. To pull off this experiment, we'll need someone tall, someone strong, someone smart, with nerves of steel and a gift for self-sacrifice. Who better than our beloved Gustave? Hope you're ready, buddy, because it's gonna be way more intense than you think. Of course, we want to do things right, so we're not putting Gustave in some nasty old swamp, but in a nice, clean bathtub. And what could possibly go wrong? Will Gustave come out unscathed? After 10 days, will the water get under his skin? Figuratively and quite possibly literally? Maybe it'll all turn out fine. Maybe. Let's not waste any more time and jump straight into today's big question. Staying in water for 10 days straight, what's it like? So why not stay in water in the great outdoors? As we said, our test subject won't be going into a river, a swamp, or even the ocean, because he wouldn't last long out there. He could die from hypothermia pretty quickly, actually. I remind you that the ocean surface temperature is about 63.5 degrees Fahrenheit or 17.5 degrees Celsius, which isn't nearly warm enough to survive hypothermia in water for long. Putting Gustave in deep water would also mean exposing him to too much water pressure. He could get tired of swimming, and we don't need him floating to the bottom before the experiment is over. And another reason to not be outside is the creatures. If we do things like Brett Archibald, the man who survived 28 hours in the ocean, our little guinea pig might end up getting nibbled on by all kinds of fish before the experiment is even over. So yeah, the ocean's probably not our best choice. We'll just put Gustave in a big tub of warm water instead, way nicer. After 3 hours, everything's fine. Well, almost. After just a few hours, the body already starts showing signs of change, ones you might be familiar with. In certain areas, especially on the hands and feet, the skin begins to wrinkle. That's because nature is clever. Your body is adapting to its watery environment. With the wrinkly fingers, you can actually grip objects underwater more easily. Give it a try during your next bath or swim. It's normal to have quite a bit of dead skin on your hands and feet, which makes sense because they're some of the most used parts of the body. These dead skin cells, which are still attached to the body, absorb much more water than living skin cells do. As a result, they swell, and that's what gives your skin that creased, pruny look. After half a day in the water, there's not much to report. Well, okay, maybe a little. Gustave's fingers are starting to look like little sausages that spent too long in the microwave. To put things in perspective, just remember that 12 hours in water is nothing compared to Jerry Hall's record. In 2013, this American, who was 49 at the time, spent 6 days underwater, and for the record, he wasn't chilling in a pool, he did it in a lake in Tennessee. The water was murky and cold, but that didn't stop Jerry from having a good time. He got quite a few visitors, including some people who came to play checkers with him. Needless to say, boredom wasn't much of a problem for him. What about Gustave, though? Using your phone? Probably not the best idea, Gustave. You know, there are more and more accidental deaths happening because of people using their phones in the bathtub. There aren't exact statistics on it, but all it takes is dropping your phone into the tub while it's charging and, well, that's the end of the line for you. Death by electrocution is no joke. And we definitely don't want Gustave kicking the bucket before the experiment's over, right? Especially since the real troubles haven't even started yet. Yeah, Gustave's not allowed out of the bath, but he does need to relieve himself at some point. Yeah, so you heard that right. He's going to have to do all his needs in the bathtub. And the water's probably going to get pretty gross pretty fast. 2 days have passed, and now the real trouble begins. Blisters are forming on Gustav's body. More specifically, they appear between his epidermis and the dermis. In fact, these little bubbles contain bodily fluids that your body is trying to evacuate. Normally, those cells and bodily fluids are cleared out when you're out in fresh air, but in this case, the water blocks that process from happening. But really, that's just the beginning of Gustav's troubles, because after 2 days, those tiny bubbles will only keep multiplying. For now, it's just visually unappealing, but harmless. But let me be clear, that's just for now. Just keep in mind, you're in a bathtub right now, Gustav, and it probably would have been way worse in a public pool. Because yes, in public pools, chlorine isn't easy on your skin. Chlorine's there to keep the water clean, but to do that, it aggressively breaks down anything unclean. Body oil, sweat, and yes, urine. Fun fact, chlorine doesn't actually have much of a smell to it, but it starts to give off that strong odor you are probably familiar with when it reacts with the stuff it's meant to attack. And in a pool, Gustav might not have been able to touch the bottom, meaning he would have had to keep himself afloat the whole time, and eventually he would have drowned from exhaustion. The only real option in a pool would be to float on your back, but even then, cramps would eventually win, and the result would also be exhaustion. Anyway, back to the bathtub where, like it or not, all that bodily waste is starting to add up. It's now been a full week that our guinea pig Gustav has been soaking in the tub, and it's really not a pretty sight. The blisters that appeared earlier have quickly led to some pretty dramatic consequences. Fair warning, things are about to get really gross. Gradually, bit by bit, the skin has peeled away. More precisely, the epidermis has separated from the dermis. In other words, raw, exposed skin covered in numerous open wounds. Our poor Gustav is basically sitting in a bath fouled by his own waste, with chunks of his own skin floating around. So we're starting to get a pretty good idea of what happens when you stay in water for too long. And the worst part, even after spending a full week, so 7 days in the bath, we haven't even beaten the world record, which stands at 10 days. That record is held by a guy named Tim Yarrow, who came up with the idea of submerging himself in a tank of water placed right in the middle of a shopping mall in South Africa. A few important details though: he was under constant medical supervision, he wore a special suit to protect his skin, and tubes supplied him with oxygen and food. Most importantly, he had another tube to keep him from dirtying the water with his, bodily waste. You might have seen some photos of Tim, since the photos of his hands after 10 days underwater went pretty viral. Meanwhile, poor Gustav is in the bath without any of that equipment. And having raw exposed skin is really not a good sign that good things will come from staying in the water any longer. One of the benefits of the epidermis is that it serves as a protective barrier, preventing harmful bacteria from entering the body. But without skin, it's going to be hard to hold out for long. It's just a matter of days before one of the many bacteria swimming around in the bath sneaks into the body. And let's just say the effects aren't exactly pleasant. The wounds will become infected and pus-filled, and if the bacteria manages to get inside, you'll face respiratory problems, stomach aches, nausea, and diarrhea, all of which will definitely only improve the quality of the bath water you're stewing in. After 10 days, we're not far from full-on carnage. And honestly, I'm this close to throwing up. At this point, it's very likely that the infections have taken you down and you're nothing more than a corpse floating in the bathtub. But hey, if you're tough enough and still alive by then, emergency responders might manage to get you out and provide medical assistance. One question you might have is, what if we'd regularly changed the water to keep it clean? The answer is, honestly, it wouldn't have made much of a difference. Whether the water's changed or not, the effects are the same. Within a few days, your skin will peel, your tissues will tear, and open wounds will appear all over your body, aka bacteria can more easily enter your body. And since it's impossible to treat those wounds or heal wounds underwater, they're only bound to get worse. And just because the water is changed regularly doesn't mean the risk of infection no longer exists. In fact, changing the water just delays the inevitable. All in all, taking a 10-day bath really isn't a good idea. Then again, we probably should have guessed that leaving a human body in water for too long wasn't going to end well, but maybe it's not quite as bad as you might have imagined. In any case, this little experiment does show us that despite everything, our bodies are actually still pretty resilient. After all, Gustave still managed to function relatively well for nearly a week in dirty, foul water. And honestly, that's kind of impressive, all things considered. Ever stayed in water way longer than planned? Tried something like this before? Drop your story in the comments. We want to hear all about it.